Welcome to Dawgs versus All Y'all, a weekly college football podcast where we discuss not only my favorite team, the Georgia Bulldogs, but we talk all things college football, hence all y'all. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and look us up on Instagram at SuplexDinnerClub. And go Dawgs. And we're live. Okay. What's going on, Greg? How you living?
Oh man, I'm loving it. I'm loving life right now. Got a whole bunch of sports going on. I'm big. I know we're talking college football today, but I'm a big Braves fan as well. Going to a bunch of those, keeping up with them. But college football here in the South, we got to talk about it and live it day in, day out, 365.
Amen. All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of Dawgs versus All Y'all, college football podcast where we don't just talk about the two-time defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, but we talk all things college football, hence all y'all. I'm Adrian. You already know it's no BS coming from me, and today this is just going to be a Dawgs exclusive roundtable. I am joined by a great friend, awesome dude, one of my good buddies. We share the love of not only college football but professional wrestling that we can ever so often talk about for sure. I'm joined today by the homie Greg. Greg, say what's up to the people, man.
What's going on, y'all? Yeah, I've been a Georgia fan my entire life. Known Adrian for we've known each other for several years now.
Yeah,
And not just sharing college football, sharing the Dawgs. I mean, we got to take it to the next level. Not just college football. We're not just some random Big Ten fans or something like that.
Right.
SEC through and through, bleeding red and black.
Amen. All right, well, Greg, where can the people follow you or find you?
So you can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at the Greg Troxell, Troxell. Much more on Instagram than I am on Twitter, but right now Twitter's kind of consumed with a lot of Brave stuff. But once we hit about August, September, you're gonna see a lot more college football on there. And but yeah, definitely Instagram and Twitter, same handle at the Greg Troxell.
Nice. All right, so obviously we're both repping the Dawgs. We've already said it, but I always like to ask our guests a random question about your team going into the season. So, Greg, my question for you today is, what is the biggest game on the schedule this upcoming season for you?
Tennessee.
Why?
Tennessee. I think Heupel's done such a good job up there. He's got that program in the right direction. After all the turmoil they've had ever since, that Philip Fulmer was, let go, right? I think he's finally that one who's come in. We saw so much improvement last year. Yeah, they had a lot of talent, but I think he's going to be that one. Good recruiting classes. They're not quite to where they were before as far as recruiting, but there's also a lot of motivation. We know in college football, motivation is huge. And I just think the game's going to be in Tennessee.
Yep.
And I think they're going to be looking for a lot of revenge because keep in mind, last year they rolled in number one, and they did not roll out number one.
No, not at all. We beat them by 14 when it possibly should have been about 30. The only reason why was the rain, and Kirby just took the air out the ball. He was like, "No, we're just gonna sit on these points." So it could have been a whole lot more ugly for that team,
for sure.
But do you think Milton's gonna be as good as advertised?
I think so. It's gonna be nice to see him get some carries, right? I mean, he's kind of been lost in the shuffle. But what's interesting is we had these guys staying, and they see that opportunity. I think this is when you start to look back at Kirby, and even go back further. I mean, you can go back to Rick, especially in certain positions. You see guys going, man, Sony made it to Noshawn made it to the NFL. Sony goes to the NFL. Chubb goes to the NFL. Gurley goes to the NFL. Then you got Swift going to the NFL. You got all these guys. So these guys are sitting back going, man, there's something in the water over there. So it's interesting because they seem to be staying more patient at the running back position as opposed to just jumping into that transfer portal right away.
Right.
So I think Milton's gonna. I thought he was going to have a bigger season last year, to be
I
honest with
thought
you.
so too.
I thought he was going to be a huge breakout.
Mm-hmm.
But we see those flashes, man. You say every once in a while you say that, boom, you hear that, and you're like, man, when he gets this turned on, it's going to be serious. And I think this is going to be his year.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Well, one thing that I definitely want to talk about. Unfortunately, we'll start off with a little bit a negative subject matter amongst the Georgia fan base that I know you have a strong opinion on, Greg,
Hmm.
and that's the fact that our team I want to say there was a report that came out from the AJC that said that Georgia players, it's been at least 10 instances of a Georgia player getting arrested or pulled over or basically getting a citation for speeding.
Hmm.
And I mean, we all know of the tragic events shortly after our championship celebration where two people unfortunately lost their lives
Hmm.
way too early. And it's been arrests here and there for the same issue, which is speeding,
Hmm.
which is being irresponsible in the car. So my question to you, man, is there a speeding problem in Athens?
I'm going to go on a different level of that. There's a huge
Okay.
speeding problem. Go ask TCU. We sped right past them the whole game. And I think there's a huge speed problem. Uh, but and you can ask, Florida, you can ask Tennessee, we got some more speed, but kind of more more addressing it the way you were talking about it.
Right.
Um, I mean, this kids being kids. I hate to say that, but it is what it
Mm,
is. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of times us, we get a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and we look back and go, "Wow, were they doing that?" Man, we were doing the same
We were doing
stuff.
doing the same exact
The
thing.
difference is if I got caught speeding, I'm not going to be in the newspaper back then. I'm not going to be on Twitter. They're not going to put Georgia Bulldog doing X, Y, Z. It just doesn't happen, right? So
Right.
now we're just more aware of it. Was it not happening 10 years ago, 20 years ago? It was,
Right.
but now everybody's more accountable. Everything just gets more blown out of proportion. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a speeding problem or a driving problem or anything. I think it's 18, 19-year-old kids being 18, 19-year-old kids.
Mm.
I speed all the time, dude. I'm not 18 or 19. But I think here's one of the things I think about behavior as a whole, not just speeding. I watched Emmitt Smith break this down one time. He said, as a freshman, I learned really fast what I was.
Mm.
He said he was out with a whole bunch of other people. He goes, I wasn't even involved in this fight. There's a fight at a bar or something. He said the next day in the paper it said Emmitt Smith and Florida Gators. He said it didn't say Florida Gators and Emmitt Smith. It said Emmitt Smith and Florida Gators. He
Right.
said because I had the biggest name there. He said I knew then I have to watch what I'm doing. And I don't think a lot of kids that think that way now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think it's instilled in them, but there's one thing that's always going to be attached. I mean, it doesn't even matter what string. If you be first string, second string, third string, you get in trouble now. Your name's in the news. And if
Definitely.
you're first string, not just news local. You're gonna be on ESPN. You're gonna be on Fox. You're gonna be on all these different places. And I think that's a learning curve that's very difficult for these kids.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point. The glaring issue for me, or what really stands out to me, was how the media definitely drugged Jalen Carter through the mud.
Oh yeah.
Like it was such a short, quick change
Hmm.
where as soon as that news came out at the combine, I want to say it was like his first day there in the combine, and
Hmm.
then the news drops that Athens police are putting out a warrant to go, because of his involvement with this, and then it went from that to a full just hailstorm. It just
Hmm.
piled on. It was just an avalanche essentially, where all of these other reports of guys getting pulled over, guys getting arrested, the AJC has been on top of Georgia's head. And I know a lot of Georgia fans aren't fans of the AJC right now because of that, or because of those journalists doing that. But like you said, it is what it is. These days, you do something, it's going to be out there. And if you're in a position or, you're on the best team in the nation. So obviously the attention's going to be on you, or the spotlight's going to be a little brighter. So
Actually, that's exactly what I was thinking. You think about our society as a whole, not just sports. We love to build up and break down. We want to pull for that underdog. I mean, everybody was pulling for Georgia versus Alabama. Everybody. And then all of a sudden, it's like all the Georgia haters come out. And it's like, why? Well, because we conquered Goliath. Now we're Goliath. And people don't want Goliath out there. It happens all the time. It's the Patriots. You can go, Tom Brady as a whole. Now you got to go. People revolting against Kansas City. You had them going against Golden State or the Lakers or whoever, and it's like we like to tear it down. So to your point, now all of a sudden you're on the number one team. You're on that Goliath, and your name is quick to be on ESPN. Your name is quick to be on NFL Network. Your name is quick to be on SEC Network and Big Ten Network and ACC and all those different places. It's just fast, right? You take Ohio State's and the Alabamas and Notre Dame's to an extent right now. Michigan, USC, your top programs, and you screw up, your name's everywhere.
Yeah.
You screw up at TCU, it ain't happening. You screw up at UAB, it ain't happening.
Right.
You screw up at UCF, it's not happening. It may be local, right, but it's not going to be headline news every sports center.
Right. Stephen A. Jackson ain't talking about it.
No.
The next morning.
No, exactly. I mean, you go back to Stetson Bennett when he got drunk. Okay, dude, you just thought he killed somebody. Like, they came out like he had committed the worst thing in the world. I'm like, the dude's 25.
Right.
Like, so he's legal age of drinking.
Right.
But, I mean, yes, he got in trouble, but how many of us have not been drunk in public? But nobody wants to look in that mirror.
That's right. That's right. So, in your opinion, what will it take? I mean, Kirby is adamant that it's being handled in-house, and I believe that 100%. Everything about Kirby Smart would suggest that he's being legit about this. But in your opinion, what is it going to take for this culture change?
I think it comes back down to, so let's go back to Kirby for a second. Kirby's that disciple of Saban, and that's what Saban did too. Saban didn't come out in public and say, this is what we're doing. Saban always came out in public and said, we're supporting them. We're supporting this. And there's always more. There's another side to the story, right? So we follow that same model. What's happening behind the scenes, and you think about, and the reason I'm going back to Saban is because Kirby, a lot of stuff he does is very mirrored to Saban. I mean, if you look at Saban's disciples, he's probably the closest one to what Saban was. And he always supports his players in public, or he knows how to push their buttons in public.
Definitely.
But you don't hear of players getting in trouble more than once or twice, or they're gone.
That's fair.
And I think that's the same thing that'll happen with Kirby, is that how he handles it, I don't know. And being a leader at work, and I relate stuff, to other businesses. You treat people fairly. You don't treat people equal, and there's a difference. You have a different motivation, and you're a different person than somebody else. So I may scream and yell at you, but this person over here, I can't. And I have to understand how to push those buttons. I can still hold you accountable. I can still hold you to the same level, but the way I address the situation is different because you're different people. And I think that's what has made these coaches so successful. They sit back and go, I'm not going to treat that person the same way.
Right.
And what does he do behind the scenes? Only time will tell. I don't think we'll ever know unless these guys come out and talk about it. But to me, he seems like that guy that has that high love for his players, but also has a high accountability.
Definitely.
And I think, and that is a hard balance to have, because you can tell those players love that man. And this is
Absolutely.
like, you just see it. And you see it in him too, though. I mean, you see certain things he does. And that's why I say that with Saban. I think I admire Saban so much. And Saban's that disciple of Belichick. And if you truly watch Belichick when he's not in that crazy media stuff, those players like him too. They respect him. They don't like everything he does. But at the same time, he has love for them, right? And I think you go to Saban, you see some of the things he said about after that last game. He said, "You think, or the last game when they played us and we beat them," and he talked about Bryce. He said, "This is the best quarterback in the nation."
Right.
Okay, he threw an interception. So what? Like basically, he just praised him right there in the worst moment of that kid's life.
Right.
You know, as far as football goes, and he's pumping him up because that's what Bryce needs. And that's why I sit back and now you watch Kirby does the same thing. So I think kind of bringing it back full circle when you said, is he losing control or how does he handle it? I just trust that he does. Because you've seen other coaches. You've seen other coaches that do lose control, right?
Right.
You sit back and you see the same guys go back to Florida. There's some Florida teams, those guys are getting in trouble. Repeat the same person over and over and over. I was like, damn, what are you going to do? Because I think at some point that sets the example and the tone for the rest of the team.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Do you feel as though that was one of the shortcomings of Mark Richt's career at Georgia? Was how he handled players getting in trouble?
To an extent, yes. I mean, he always talked about he handled it behind the scenes too, but the difference was you never heard him call anybody out. I think he was that person he treated everybody the same.
Mm.
And I feel like Kirby doesn't. Saban doesn't. You're starting to see Lane Kiffin doesn't. You're starting to see these guys who they'll call out certain players in a way in public. They will support others in public. Mark Richt was always like, we'll just handle it behind the scenes. But yeah, well, he just got in trouble again. It's like, what are we going to do? Because you think about, go back to the Mark Richt years, you didn't just have people getting arrested. You had people getting suspended by the NCAA for violations, signing autographs and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, do these guys understand it? I felt like I don't think he ever lost control. I just don't think there was accountability.
I feel that. I don't think that Mark Richt ever didn't have control of the program. It's like you said. He handled his players, his team, his organization in a way that's different than Kirby, and obviously that's translating into big wins for Kirby because past couple years, like how can you not say that Georgia isn't the top program in the nation? And he's the reason why, because he brought such a change to the entire culture of that program, the infrastructure. The school is spending more money than they ever did under Rick with Kirby, and he pushed for that. So it makes sense.
Let me throw in a scenario at you because you brought up Rick. So I compare, I talked about Kirby and Saban and what they've done with their talent, what they've done behind the scenes, how the programs look, how the programs seem to run. Mark Richt was a disciple of Bobby Bowden, and Bobby Bowden had people who got in trouble repeatedly.
Yeah.
Bobby Bowden had people in the news all the time, and arguably, Bobby Bowden should have won 4 or 5 national championships with the type of talent he had, and in my opinion, underachieved. Contrast that to Mark Richt. With the talent he had, he should have had more. He should have had some, at least one. So he should have more SEC titles. He had people getting in trouble repeatedly. It's a mirror. It's a mirror of what Bobby Bowden was doing, and now we see the mirror of what Kirby from Saban. And it's interesting to contrast that.
That's actually a good point, and that makes perfect sense because, I mean, you're gonna, as a disciple or as a former assistant of a coach, you're gonna probably take off a lot of those qualities and positives and negatives. You're not just taking the positives from the person you've worked for a decade. You're gonna take some of those negative qualities also, and it takes a very unique type of person to tweak their own personality or their own, be able to identify, oh yeah, this is not good. I should not do this. But if you're working for someone for a decade, you're basically going to mirror a lot of what they've done in their career. So that makes sense. Yeah. All right. We have the next topic, which is another huge hot topic when it comes to college football, and that's Colorado and Coach Prime. And I titled this one Colorado versus everybody. Because I said it in the last roundtable, it's so weird how divisive Coach Deion Sanders is, his reputation, or what we think of him as college football fans. And he does a very good job of pushing for or fueling the narratives of being divisive, of being a divisive topic. And one of those reasons is his stance on the transfer portal. And I'm gonna definitely ask you about that, Greg, but I want to give a little context to our listeners. When on Coach Prime's first day as Colorado head coach, he sat down to players and he had a speech for them. Obviously, it wasn't just the traditional rah-rah, I'm here to win, that sort of thing. It wasn't that at all. It was hey, I'm here. The school brought me here to win, and you guys were 1-11 last year. So a lot of you won't be here. I'm just going to be honest with you, and I want to be forthcoming. And he did it in his own Coach Prime way. And the quote of, I brought my own bags and they're Louis, that stands out amongst a lot of fans. It rubbed a lot of people off the wrong way. But those of us who knew Coach Prime, we weren't surprised because he's always been a braggadocious type person. So fast forward, you're starting to see, you saw a mass exodus of players from that team. You're also seeing a large influx of new players coming in from other programs. I'm seeing a lot of Florida State kids that were on that team that are now there in Colorado. It makes sense considering his ties to that area or the state of Florida and how we grew up looking up to him. So it makes perfect sense. The more and more the media talks about the transfer portal and obviously Coach Deion, because he is the face of this new era of player acquisition. Obviously, coaches around the nation are going to be asked, how do they feel about this stuff? One of those coaches that actually who I will say I respect because he put his name beside his words, was Pittsburgh's coach, Pat Narduzzi. And he basically said, hey, I'm not a fan of it. This isn't the college football that I signed up for. And I'm basically not a fan of what Coach Prime is doing in Colorado. So my question to you, Greg, is Coach Pat Narduzzi hating with his opinion of Coach Prime?
Did he elaborate? Because I didn't see exactly what he said. Did he elaborate on what he doesn't like?
Okay. I'm glad that you asked because I have basically what he said. So let me pull it up. Okay, so Coach Narduzzi said, that's not the way it's meant to be. That's not what the rule would intend it to be. It was not to overload your roster. We'll see how it works. But to me, it looks bad on college football coaches across the country. And he was more so talking about the fact that some coaches are exploiting the transfer rule by they're pushing kids out. Essentially, that's what he's saying. He's suggesting that colleges should not be firing kids, essentially. And he's not a fan of that.
So let me address that as opposed to address Dion first.
Okay.
So that's the evolution. Whether I like it, you like it. So the kids are firing them. The kids are coming in, oh, you didn't let me play. I've been coddled all these years, and I'm just going to use that side. I've been coddled all these years. I was a top player in Pee Wee, and I was a top player in 8th grade, and I was playing varsity in 9th grade, and I've been all this, and I'm a 5-star, and you didn't play me? I'm going somewhere else. I mean, we've seen it across the board. And so they're firing their teams. So why can't the team turn around and fire them? I mean, here's another situation. I'll use my daughter, if you don't mind, so she plays volleyball. She's on a very high level team. They have trials coming out. She's not guaranteed to be on that team next year.
Right.
She might move up. She may move down. Guess what? They want to win, and they're going to stack their teams the best way they can. Those girls who are on the elite team, they're not guaranteed to be on that team next year. So why should you be guaranteed to be at Colorado, Pittsburgh, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State? But I would argue the transfer portal, I don't think coaches have done it a whole lot yet, but the transfer portal opened that. See, everybody said, oh, the transfer portal is going to be great for the kids, great for the kids, great for the kids. Be careful what you ask for, because there's a flip side to that says all of a sudden, you're a 5-star. We're going to take it down a whole different level. You're a 5-star. We as a team, as an organization, lined you up with a $300,000 NIL deal, and you're underachieving. You're gone. What are you giving me? Because the players right now are saying, what's in it for me? They're doing the with them, right? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? The colleges, I think, are now going to flip it around and say, what's in it for us? We give. You take. You got to go.
That's a fact. I mean, that's basically what Coach Brown has said time 100%. And time again, that, hey, this is a business, and I'm here to win, and I can't win with what you guys presented me. This school last year.
At the end of the day, it's like he's getting paid millions, but let's just say, whoever, they're all getting paid millions in these Power Fives, especially.
Mm-hmm.
They're judged on wins and losses. And what is the true core of winning and losing in the Power Five? Recruiting.
Definitely.
If you're not getting those 4 and 5 stars, you're probably going to lose. Now, you can have a nice year. You may have maybe 2. But consistently, you're not going to keep it.
Definitely.
So that's one. So if I don't get you, and if I look around this team, if I walk into a team and you're 1 and 11, y'all suck. It's what it is. Yep. And I'm going to look at the talent. But I'm not going to just look at the talent. I'm going to look at the heart. And I think that's one of the things he did address. Prime did talk about, you guys come in here all hyped up. Y'all 1-11 last year. Like, right. What are you happy about? I mean, like, there's nothing in here to be happy about. I'm here to win, and you may not be here. You're going to fight for a job. You started last year. You started last year on a 1-for-11 team. You may have to go. I don't fault him because he's being held accountable to win. So who do you hold accountable? Yes, you got to have good coaching, but you got to have players too.
Definitely.
That buy in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how locked in you are with paying attention to what Colorado's been doing as in player acquisition, but if you look at that team in the spring, they were completely different than what was the team that was in last fall. Mm-hmm. And I'm more than confident that the team that's coming out with their opener against TCU is going to be so much different than what we saw in the spring, because he's acquiring so many kids and actually some impressive players that I've seen. So they look completely different. Have you watched his son's YouTube, that Well Off Media?
No, I have not.
You should check it out. It's pretty cool. Sometimes it's funny. I do question some things, as in maybe it's a little too showy,
Hmm.
as in maybe you shouldn't be showing clips from practice
Yeah.
against your opponents. But that's a good segue because of that YouTube channel. One thing that stood out to me just recently in one of their most recent episodes, the guys were working out in the gym, lifting weights, and they were playing music, dancing, that sort of thing. And one of the players, and I'm seeing more of this coming out of Colorado, one of the players just called out TCU. And I'll put a clip up. He was singing and he called out TCU, and that's going to be the opener.
Hmm.
I know what we saw in the national championship game with TCU. I get that. But they those guys were like the top team in the Big 12
Hmm.
up until the Big 12 championship. That's not a scrub team by any means. And Colorado, they were a scrub team last year. And even though
Hmm.
it's completely different players and all of that, man, you're a new team, you're a new nucleus, and now you're playing against a team that did play in the national championship game, that did, just like you, add players through the transfer portal, talented players. They
Hmm.
added a couple Alabama players that I like on that team. So my question to you, Greg, when it comes to that YouTube and that clip that I just put on the show for everyone to see, do you think that Colorado's in a position to actually provide locker room material?
Are they in a position to?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
But I can see, so Dion was the king of locker room material. So
This is true.
let's call him, Dion was, so let's go back for a second. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me. Big Falcons fan, always a huge Dion fan.
Mm-hmm.
Never a Cowboys fan, but I had a Cowboys jersey with Dion's number. And I don't buy football jerseys with people's names on them. I don't.
Mm.
Um, but I did buy that one. Again, not a Cowboys fan, but I've always been a Dion fan. Always. And I liked his brashness. I liked his flashiness. I liked all that stuff. And I think he's that type that will come back and say, "You want to say that? You better back it up." And I think he will hold them accountable from a different perspective than, say, a Saban or a um, Kirby. But I think he'll be more like a Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin don't shy away from that stuff either.
This is true.
So he's going to create a certain atmosphere. But let me go back for a second on Dion.
Okay.
Because yeah, do I think they're in a position? No. But I see him using that as motivation back to his team. But we'll go back on Dion for a second. So we talked about he changed this whole entire team, and then the pit coach is saying this and that. You're not going to see him do that next year.
Right.
He built a foundation. He said, "Yep, I'm gonna go out here." It's like a guy walking in with an expansion team, or like, "Look, let all these players go, and I'm gonna go grab all these free agents." Kind of like Jimmy Johnson did when they traded off Herschel and they traded off get all these draft picks and all that kind of stuff. They, all right, we're gonna rebuild, and we're gonna rebuild with the right players, and that's what he's doing. But the difference is now you don't have to do it all through recruiting. You can make an immediate impact from the transfer portal. Whereas before, you saw certain coaches do it through the junior college route.
Right.
So I think he's making a splash because it's what he's doing now. But I think people who think he's going to continue to do it like that always are short-sighted.
Mm.
I think he's well aware that you have to build from within. Because keep in mind, he was on those 90s Cowboys teams.
That's a
I
good
will
point.
argue all day long those 90s Cowboys teams built it through the draft, and after that they fell right off. Why? Because they didn't sustain it.
Mm.
They could not sustain building their own players, and they started trying to go free agent and all this other stuff, whereas originally they built it through the draft. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to build these teams truly through recruiting.
Mm.
And I think that's going to be his approach. Now, fast forward a little bit into that whole brashness. That's also the team taking on part of his personality because he is a brash person. You hear some of these things from the coach standpoint, where he's very accountable and very strict, but he's Coach Prime. He's not Coach Dion.
Right.
So
Right.
he knows what he's doing, and he's appealing to a certain attitude and all of that. So I think he probably likes it. But the reverse of it, I can just truly see him saying, "Oh, yeah, you talking. Let me show you what happens when you talk." And if they get their butts kicked, he will turn back around and say, "This is why. You're not prepared to back that up." And I just see he's smart. I don't think
Definitely.
he's great X's and O's. I think he's a very good motivator, bringing people together and getting them in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree there. I'm looking forward to watching Colorado and seeing this experiment, because that's what it is. This is unprecedented. Like, it's an experiment. You've turned over your roster. You've turned over 95% of your roster, basically. And now, within essentially 3 months, you have to create an environment where we're trying to win in a culture that, I mean, hell, Colorado hasn't been relevant in college football, what, 3 decades basically now? Since, like,
So let me ask you this.
Cordell?
What do you look at as successful? So they go from 1-11 to what? What's successful?
For me, and that's a good segue for what I had next. For me, if they win 4 or 5 games, that's successful to me. I don't think that Coach Prime is gonna voice that as being success at all, because that completely goes against everything that he's given up. But I mean, you went 1-11, man, and
Right.
you weren't just losing games; you were getting drugged, you were getting beat up in multiple games. So I mean, 4 or 5 wins, that's a successful season for me.
Yeah. I agree. I think 6 is a super successful season.
Definitely, that's bowl eligible. They're
Yeah.
going to a bowl.
And I just don't. And looking at their schedule, I mean, they got, of course, TCU, they got USC, they got Oregon. I mean, yeah, Oregon State.
Pac-12 is tough, man.
Yeah,
This year.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's nothing on here. You said they have no, you know,
Besides Colorado State, they got it. I
yeah,
would
but
say that's a gimme.
they don't have any the Division two, the 1AA schools. They don't have any of
Right.
those on here. So they don't have that. Hey, I paid somebody to come
Right.
be a
Get their head
developmental
kicked
game.
in. Right.
Yeah, they don't have that. So, I mean, 4 wins I think would be an accomplishment. 5 would be tremendous, and 6 would be exceeding every expectation.
Yeah, I think Vegas over under right now is 4.5. So what are you thinking? How many wins are they gonna get?
I think they squeak out 5.
5.
Yeah, I think it's one of those seasons that they squeak it out. Like somehow, some way, they just win a game they're not supposed to. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I mean. 4 just seems really low. I just think somehow, some way, he'll will them into another win. I have confidence in Dion from that perspective.
Definitely. I mean, before the spring game, because I have been paying attention to those players moving back and forth, right? And I'm looking at the players that are coming in. I'm like, man, that's actually a pretty solid player. You can win with this player coming in. And once Vegas released their win totals, saying 4.5, I said, looking at their schedule, 4 wins was what I was steadfast on. I was like, from that schedule, because this is a very challenging year as a Pac-12 team, because you got a lot of high-level quarterback play and offense, because USC, Oregon, Oregon State was a really good team.
Washington,
Florida will tell you that. Washington was one of the top
Utah. I mean,
offenses.
I
Yeah,
was just saying
you got players, and then UCLA even is a solid program. Like Chip's gonna have them scoring points. So I mean, I was stuck on 4, but then once I really started looking at the players that they were bringing in on the back end of the transfer portal, I was like, okay, I'll give them at least one more win. So my prediction is 5.
So I just pulled back. I pulled up their schedule from last year, 2022, and I mean I understand that they turned over everybody, but dude, they got their asses kicked.
That's what I'm telling you, man.
I mean, I'm looking at everything, right?
Yeah.
And I haven't, I knew, we're on the East Coast, and sadly we don't pay attention to the Pac-12 like we probably should. But and the only win they had was in overtime against Cal. But beyond that, there was not a close game. The closest one they had was 42-34 against Arizona State, but everything else was just a drubbing. And
see, I watch West Coast games because I watch games all day. That's why my wife hates me during football season because, like, I'm not present on Saturdays. Like, I'm just locked in. And I would watch those Pac-12 games, and I watched Colorado a number of times, and I was just like, those guys weren't just, like I said before, those guys weren't just losing. They were getting their tails kicked in. Like, so turning over that roster, it makes sense if you're trying to win. Like, if Coach Prime is just there to be the coach of Colorado, then, yeah, have those players. But if you're trying to win, you gotta do something very drastic, and what he's currently doing is drastic. But we're definitely pulling for him. So I'm on 5 wins. You're saying 5 wins as well, and we're gonna keep an eye on Colorado for sure. In fact, listeners, go ahead and comment down below how many wins is Coach Prime and Colorado gonna put in on the board. All right, final topic, Greg, is this college football EA issue that we have. So everyone's been looking forward to the release of an EA college football game, NCAA football. We all grew up loving it. I know that was one of the staples in my dorm room and frat house all the time was we were playing NCAA all day, every day. And then you had these issues. Long story short, there was legislation that pretty much said, hey, you can't use these players or former players' likeness without paying them. That was agreed upon, so EA shut it down. No more college football games, right? On video game. So I will say us fans got very creative and started with the updates and keeping up with the rosters and that sort of thing. So shout out to those guys because they put in a lot of work. I don't know if you ever played the revamped versions of these games, but details are really good. They've added stadiums, and it looks damn near better than the original game for sure. But now, all of us were excited with the initial news that, hey, because of NIL is open up an opportunity for EA Sports to step in and develop a new NCAA football game. So we're all super stoked, excited about it. Well, all that positivity got derailed once a report came out saying that EA Sports presented college football players with the opportunity to be on the game, but for $500. And a lot of players are pretty much obviously saying that's not enough. Or a lot of fans or people that are pro players, they're saying, hey, that's not enough money. You need more money for these players. And asking even further questions of, hey, what about the cover athlete? How much money is he making? Should the quarterbacks be making more money? How this should be scaled? And even just recently, EA Sports just got sued by a company that represents players because their cut of that money, in their opinion, wasn't near enough. So obviously money is going to be issues. So my question to you, Greg, is what side are you on? I mean, are you on the side of the fans that say, hey, the players should be honored, accept the $500 and be in a video game? Or are you on the side that says, hey, we got to figure something out, pay these players more?
So I'm going to answer that with questions.
Okay.
And I did have a brief discussion with somebody. So how much should they get paid? How much should they get paid? I said, and I have no idea what they pay NFL, but there's a bigger issue there. NFLPA signs off, and that's split evenly across the board, right?
Right.
Except for the cover athlete. So at some point, EA Sports is in this to make money. So let's look at business. We're not going to talk emotion. We're going to look at just straight business.
Definitely.
Madden's their number one seller. They're not going to sabotage that, right? So 99% of the people who probably buy NCAA are going to still buy Madden. But I don't know how much they actually make off of Madden. I don't know how much they're making off of NCAA. I don't know what those sales used to look like. But, so I just Googled this. And the last NCAA game had 1A and 1AA game teams.
Right.
They had some HBCUs, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So they had more than just, and they had every Division I. So, I'm going to give you some numbers. In D1, there are 15,167 players.
Okay.
In D2, there's 18,889. Okay? We're not going to go D3 or anybody else.
Right.
So I'm going to throw a number at you. So I said, so it's 15,167 plus 18,889. So 34,000 players.
Okay.
Times 500 is $17 million. Would you pay out $17 million to turn around and make what? See, that's where we don't want to look at. We don't want to look at the dollars and cents. We want to say, oh, Bryce deserves this much and Stetson deserves that much and they deserve $750 or $1,000. I'm not. That's why I'm taking out the emotion. Let's look at straight business numbers. $17 million for D1, D2 schools. Would you pay it if you're the company?
How much?
Because keep in mind, you got to pay everybody else.
Right.
That's just to say you can be in the game. That's no development. By the way,
true.
that's also not paying Georgia and SEC schools and everybody else for their likeness of the logos, of NCAA rights. So you got to think about, you got NCAA rights, you got college rights, you got college football playoff rights, which is not tied to NCAA.
Right.
Technically, we've never had an NCAA college football champion in Division 1A, by the way. They've been a national champion for AP polls.
Right.
We've had a national champion for the BCS, which was not NCAA sanctioned.
Right.
And now we have the college football playoff. That's separate. You're also going to pay ESPN or Fox or CBS or whoever else. You're also going to pay your announcers. So think about everything else. So that's all over here. Just to even get to that point, $17 million.
Yeah, that number is kind of crazy. 17 mil, you're immediately in the hole.
100%. So if I was EA Sports, I'd say nope, I'm not doing it.
So do you think that now it's no chance of a game being put out, or?
So one of the suggestions I had thrown out there. Right now, many colleges negotiate their own NIL deals, and they distribute that money.
Right.
If they're smart, they don't go after everybody. If they're real smart, in my opinion, and this is going to cover most everybody, let me negotiate a deal with the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12. Maybe not even Big 12 now, but let me negotiate my own deals with them, and then they distribute that money. Because And there's ways to do it, but I think you don't have to spend $17 million. What if, throw a total, what if you came out with a game and you said, you know what, I can't spend $17 million on players, but you know what I can do? I'll create an NCAA game called College Football, SEC rivalries, SEC versus Big Ten. Nobody else in the game. Would you buy it?
I would.
Because you keep everything else. You create your
Yeah.
own dynasty,
Yeah,
create
yeah.
your own college, do all the other stuff. But you got SEC versus Big Ten. It sells. ACC's like, I want in. Pac-12's like, I want in. Just a thought.
Mm.
But just looking at it straight business-wise, would you spend $17 million out the gate with that includes absolutely nothing?
Not just for player likeness, no.
No.
Do you think that, I mean, that's kind of just squeezing numbers. If you squeeze out the lower division schools and just put it toward scholarship players, do you think that would still be a pretty strong number?
It'd be, I'd done it, it's still starting out with $7 million.
Yeah. True.
And again, maybe they make, I don't know what they make off of it, and I don't know how much it costs to develop it. I have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that we all liked about it is it was different than Madden. It did not play the same. It was not the exact same platform.
Right.
So, it's got to be different. So you got to create a different game because that's the only way you're going to sell it. So I have no clue how much what it costs to develop one of those things,
Right.
but it's got to be several million.
Definitely. I don't know, man. I'm on the side of I'm okay with the revamp series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with downloading what these guys have already put together of updating rosters because it's no win-win scenario. Like it's a lose-lose. Someone is going to lose in this situation.
So here's a question. So I know NIL is the big issue here, like before it existed,
Mm-hmm.
because they would come out and I'm just using. I think the last one had Tebow in it, maybe, and something like that. I remember, and it just says, QB 15.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem, we all knew who it was.
Right.
But the problem is they started making it look like him. What if you make the players more generic, and you still give them the same skill sets?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find loopholes, right? Again, I'm totally looking at it from business.
Right.
And because the reason they never use names, this was their loophole before. They never put a name in there.
Right.
Ever. And their cover athlete was always somebody who graduated the year before.
Right.
So because colleges, as a rule, could not make any money off of a current player, which is also why when you walked into the UGA's bookstore and you bought a 14 jersey, it didn't say the green on the back.
Right.
It didn't say 11, didn't say Murray. There's no names. You could buy a Walker, Herschel, but you're not going to see hardly any names out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's also why when you bought calendars, they were all previous players. There were nothing from the current season. And if they were, actually, there were even linemen and everything. They're very careful that they couldn't put anybody on there.
Mm-hmm.
They could give out stuff, so you could get posters and things like that. And they can give stuff away. So they were very careful never to put a name in there. So I was kind of curious of how did they argue that at one point? I mean, it's not that hard to figure out what you're trying to play,
Right.
but there's a gray area there.
Well, I do think that was they were doing it until they got called out on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm pretty sure the first game, especially when they started doing like past teams, like the legends and all of that. Like if you were playing with a Florida State Legends team, and there's a number 2 at cornerback, it's like we all know that
We know who it
that is, right?
But
So
it didn't have his
wasn't
name.
it wasn't until those players start saying like, "Hey, man, nah, that's not cool. We want our money." So that's what blew this whole. I mean, honestly, I would almost want to say that the video game is what fueled this whole NIL scenario being brought into play, because once that whole lawsuit started with EA Sports so long ago, that's what really opened or got this thing moving about NIL. So players actually getting paid for their name and likeness.
I think that was part of it. I think the violations of autographs and all that kind of stuff was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And there was violations from years ago where people allegedly were doing ads for car dealerships in Tuscaloosa, things like that, and getting paid with cars and things like that. But and this is years and years and years ago. My dad told me about that. And so yeah, I mean, I love the NIL situation. I think it's a good thing for the players. I think there needs to be some more control around that whole thing of how they structure it. I know that's not what we're trying to talk about, but but if we go back just to that business standpoint, if I'm EA Sports, you say what side am I on? I'm not necessarily on a side. I just look at it from a business standpoint that says I can't walk in paying 17 million. I don't know if I can walk in paying 7 million. On the player side, so I can argue that side, but I can also argue like $500. What's that?
Right.
And the thing is, I just don't see how you can come out and say, hey, Bryce, you get 100,000, and if you're not a top 10 player, you don't get this. I mean, how do you rank that? And college football is so hard to do. And you can't pay the quarterbacks more. I don't know how you do it. I have no idea. It's like, you could, I guess, but, think about, you roll into 2 years ago, 2021, going back to our Dogs, JT Daniels was number one. Stetson went on the depth chart. So that year, he gets paid $500. JT Daniels gets $300,000,
right,
or $100,000. JT wins the national championship. Then now the next year, do you renegotiate? I mean, how is it a yearly contract? How do you do it? Because now all of a sudden Stetson's like, oh, I'm worth more than that. and then can the players opt out? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that come into it, and that's why I was kind of thinking maybe you just pare it down. And the thing is, people are looking at it from a business perspective right now, but let's call it the emotional piece. The player, if you came out with that game that I was talking about, rivalries, and you call it Big Ten versus SEC, you don't think that players across the country and every other freaking conference would be like, this is bull. I want to be in that game. It ain't even about the money anymore. I want to be in that game.
right.
And there's, out of those, 30,000 people, or however many I said, well, let's just use 15,000 for D1.
Right.
How many of those go to the NFL and get into a video game?
That's a fact.
That's a legacy thing.
Yeah.
So at some point, I'm taking my $500 and I'm going to sit back and be like, I'm in a game. Like, I am in a game. I can show this to my kids. I show it to my grandkids. That's a legacy that, dude, I am in a freaking video game. I didn't create myself. Nobody else did. They created me, and I was rated a 50. But I'm in the game.
But you're in the game.
So, I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at it. And to me, looking at it from a player business side.
Right.
Let's say you're Bryce Young. Do I need more than $500? I have so many other NIL deals going on. I'm getting paid a lot. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to be a top 5 pick. So, again, I'm in the game. I wouldn't argue with him if he said no, he didn't want to do that. He wants to get paid. I wouldn't argue it. But I think you approach it from the standpoint of, let me see if I can get these players hooked in where they just want to be in the game.
Honestly, I put this out like when the whole lawsuit came and all of that. I think the only possibility of us being able to see both sides agree to this is if they go toward a pay model very similar to what the NFL does. And that's, like you said, the players association. So what's going to have to happen for this, in my opinion, for this to happen, to go through, is the players are going to have to unionize. And I don't see that happening because That's the very last thing that the NCAA wants. That's the very last thing college football as a whole wants. And it's so many different kids with different goals and that sort of thing. I don't ever see them being able to make a union, but I think that's the only way that they would be able to agree to something and negotiate a deal that would help or at least work for both sides.
So I'm going to argue something with that.
Okay.
I think that's the worst thing that could happen.
Okay.
And here's why. For the players. So we just talked about second and third string players.
Right.
Who are not getting NILs. Who also, there's a lot of them who don't have money. They're college students. I don't know about you. I have no money.
Right.
So, union wants dues.
This is true.
And a union is going to take part of your money. So now you as a third stringer gets $1,000 and they take 30%.
Now you're right back to
So, and I mean, let's don't get it twisted. Unions are businesses.
Definitely.
And yeah, they're going to represent you. Some represent well, some don't. Is what it is. They're a business and they're making money too. So if you go out here to these kids who don't have an actual income, like, yeah, they get NIL, but let's take that away. They can't have jobs. They can't do these other things. So you don't have an income, but yet you want money from me. And those, I promise you, colleges ain't going to pay it.
Definitely.
So I don't see that as a positive either. Yeah, they may can negotiate a deal, but outside of the top few players, and they're not going to want to pay all those dues for everybody else either.
That's fair. That's a good point. I'm just gonna be okay with the revamp series, man.
I think I don't know what the exact answer is to it. I have no idea how they do it in Madden as far as even legacy players and all that kind of stuff. But there's
I think that's. I mean, they pay the Players Association,
correct,
which is distributed amongst all.
right.
Of them.
I think it's distributed equally.
That's what. I think it is, except for that cover athlete.
Yeah, and then legacy players probably get less, but like the legends.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting topic to discuss. But it's very, I think, when you take that emotion out, like, oh, if I was a player, I should get this, or when you look at that numbers and dollars and cents, would you do it if you're EA Sports? Yeah, and I mean, they could always come out with, they could put generic players in it. I mean, at the end of the day, and I'd buy it because you know what? Let's go back to having fun with the game. I used to love it, man. I played it. I had different goals. I never, like I said, rarely did I ever start playing as Georgia.
Okay.
I would come in as a coach with a low-level team, and my goal was to get to Georgia. And so my goal was to move through the different conferences and take the different jobs and do my career and all that kind of stuff. And then I did one where I created my own. I had North Georgia State University. We were the Dragons, and our logo was UAB.
Okay.
And I created my stadium, created everything, and just worked our way up. And it was just so much fun. I became a very dominant program too.
Nice.
But I went through all the recruiting. To me, that was the best part. Playing the game was the most secondary part of this whole thing. I enjoyed recruiting. I enjoyed taking different jobs. I enjoyed playing. It was just a blast to me. Yeah. And that's what, for me, made it so much more fun than Madden.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And you mentioned it earlier, the gameplay was different. It seemed like NCAA was a bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit faster. And, depending on your gameplay, that could be a positive or a negative. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, man, I think we've reached the end of today's episode, Greg. I want to thank you again for joining us, man. Let the people know where they can follow you, find you, and anything that you're working on.
For sure. You definitely find me at the Greg Troxel on Instagram and on Twitter, same handle at the Greg Troxel. Man, it's been a pleasure being here, just kind of talking, and hopefully I brought some different perspectives and different. That's why I try to look at things, from a different perspective, just looking at things, not just from an emotional standpoint.
For sure.
But yeah, things I'm looking forward to, things I'm working on. I mean, I'll let you know in the next few weeks. I have a couple businesses I'm working on, and some stuff like that. And hopefully, soon one of those businesses will sponsor this podcast.
Hell
But
yeah.
we're gonna work on that, man.
All right.
But
I'm with that.
until then, it's all about go Dogs, go Braves on my MLB part. But we're on Dogs versus y'all, so go Dogs, and I can't wait to see how this season unfolds.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one, man, for sure, for sure. And folks, definitely follow the brand at Suplex Dinner Club. It is home of hopefully two of your favorite podcasts, Dogs versus All Y'all. We drop every Monday. We talk not just about the Georgia Bulldogs, but we talk all things college football, hence All Y'all. And then on Wednesdays is cool conversations with some very interesting people on the Life and Times podcast, which is short for the Life and Times of a Restaurant Lifer podcast. So that's a fun show. We drop every Thursday on there. So follow us at Suplex Dinner Club. We're on Instagram as well as YouTube. And y'all have a wonderful week. And always remember, go Dogs.
Your ass is prepared for this shit for fucking 365 days. I think about the fucking in that locker room. Think about getting our opportunity. All the shit you went through this week to get ready for this game. Now is when you pay the fucking price. You go out there with energy, enthusiasm. Hey, now, ain't nobody in this room should be cautious. Ain't nobody in this room should be nervous about shit. Go out here and fuck their ass up. Don't think about scoreboard. Don't think about shit. You think about knocking the shit out of them. Did you hear what Box said on Monday? When I sat in that fucking meeting, I wanted to go fucking play right then. Tore your shit up out here. 2 years ago, fuck your shit up. Goddamn pride and joy tells me you fuck these guys up. You go play the right way. You play the right way. You knock their ass off. You stay off the fucking ground. You tackle the fucking man with the ball. The shit's easy. Look at the right shit. Punish their ass on offense and kick their ass on special teams, guys. It's about who the fuck we are. I believe in you.